We are back, and at long last, so is the EFL. Yes, welcome along to Match Week 1 predictions from the 24-25 Championship season here at the Honest Football Podcast. All 12 games will be covered this weekend. We're going to predict the scores for all of them. And as always, like we did last season, and you guys got involved in your numbers, we'll ask you to give your predictions down in the comments too. If you beat or match my overall score, you'll get a shout out in a recap at the start of the next episode when we look ahead to match week 2 next Wednesday. For now though, a couple of quick plugs before we move into the new season. Firstly, a massive thank you to everyone who's got involved and watched all the pre-season predictions. We did do our promotion, playoff and relegation tips for all 3 EFL divisions in the National League. That playlist is up in the eye above. You can also come and join our league for Fantasy EFL this season. If you're playing, find a link in the description, come and get involved. There is a small prize for the winner at the end of the year as well. And of course, the final plug, something brand new for the channel this year. The first championship game of the season and the first game we're going to be covering in this video, we're going to be watching live here on Friday night. Blackburn v Derby at 8 o'clock. If you're watching at home, you can come and join along. We try and create the sort of having a chat with your mates in a pub environment. We've done it over on the FM channel a number of times during the Euros and it worked really well. So come and get involved, come and have a chat. And we'll look ahead toward the weekend football too, whilst watching Blackburn Rovers versus Derby. And that's where we're going to start this week because it's match week 1 of the championship. Now match week rather than match day because the games are spread over so many days due to the new TV deal. And on Friday, it is Blackburn Rovers versus Derby County. 2 sides that a huge number of you have got in the relegation mix this year. And I wonder if this game, even on the first day, might be quite crucial as a statement of intent. Of course, Derby finished in style to get second place last season. Did really well to come up from League One in that tight race with Bolton and with Pompey, who ran away with it in the end. And Blackburn are a side that many feel will continue to drift. They've had a relatively quiet summer window, albeit since I predicted them to finish 22nd last week, they have made a couple of good additions. They've obviously gambled on a couple of strikers, with it being assumed that Sammy Schmodics will be moving on in the coming weeks. Sam Gallagher has obviously left the club as well. But Andy Vyman is a clever addition because he's someone with experience of the championship and you kind of know what you're going to get from him. So they've also gone for a couple of safe options as well. But John Eustace, we would expect to produce a more pragmatic approach this season. I think they're going to have to, in truth, because they might not have the stardust that they've had in previous years. And Derby, while they haven't improved massively off the pitch yet, they are a side that I feel in many areas were championship ready. But this is going to be a very tough ask. Derby will be coming and trying to get a result. We know John Eustace, generally from what he had 2 years ago at Birmingham, went for a more aggressive approach at home and then tried to sit back on the road. So I actually think this game could be a bit of a thriller, unlike the other game on Friday night. There's part of me that thinks because Schmodics is still there that Blackburn will score a couple of goals. But I don't know if I quite trust them at the back yet either. They had a few ropey days towards the end of last season, but then they did keep 3 clean sheets in 4 at the end. So do I judge anything based on that, particularly with new players coming in? I don't think so. I'm going to go for a bit of a thriller. I thought 2-1 Blackburn at first. I'm going to stick my neck on the line. Go for a 2-2 draw to begin. As we move on to the second of the Friday night games, which is Preston North End versus Sheffield United. Now, both of these sides finished their respective seasons awfully in a championship and the Premier Division. Not many goals between them and plenty going in at the other end. But it's been an interesting summer because although Sheffield United will start on -2, they've made some really good additions in attacking areas in particular over the last couple of weeks. The additions of Kiefer Moore and Callum O'Hare on their day provide match winners and in different styles as well. Callum O'Hare, who can carry the ball, who can score a goal from distance, who can create something out of nothing. Kiefer Moore, who can nick you one from a set piece, who just needs one good delivery to produce, can hold the ball up and take pressure off. And one thing we know about Preston from last year, whilst they actually overachieved in league position, they didn't really dominate many games. They were often on the back foot, they often had less chances and less territory than their opposition. And you wonder how long you can get away with that. They've done a good job defensively for the most part, but it did drift at the end of the year. It's not been a particularly active summer. I wouldn't say the squad's improved at any point so far. And I think it might be a flurry of late loans for them. As a result, I'm going to go for a lower scoring game. Sheffield United won't concede as many now they're playing against lower level opposition. And Preston just don't score goals. It was 5 without one at the end of last year. I'm going to go for a very low scoring game. I would encourage you to watch the other one on Friday night. I'm going to go for Sheffield United to nick it away from home by 1-0. Nice and easy. As we move on to Saturday, where all of the matches take place at 12:30 because the three leagues have been spread out across the day. And we start with Cardiff City versus Sunderland. Two sides that again finished with back-to-back defeats at the end of last year after middling seasons. Sunderland fell away after sacking Tony Mowbray, making a disastrous appointment in Mick Beale and then leaving it in interim charge. Cardiff actually did better than many expected under Errol Balut. And boy, haven't they had an interesting summer, because they're basically building a bit of a mid-table Premier League legends team. We've seen Callum Chambers come in early in the summer, Anwar El Ghazi added to that recently. And of course, in addition, you've got someone like Chris Willock, who at times at QPR looked brilliant over the years. Maybe not as consistently as people would like, though. For Sunderland, it's been a bit of a frustrating window so far. The question I ask at the moment is, where are the goals coming from? There are a couple of decent, solid additions, so Alan Brown being one from Preston. I'm just not sure they've added enough real quality yet. They've been needing a striker probably ever since Ross Stewart went or got injured the second time, and when Ellis Sims was recalled from his loan. So for 18 months, they've been a little bit short in that area. Jack Clark is still there for now, which may produce a bit of magic. But Regis Labrie is a manager coming in who, to be fair, we talked about him. He's great developing young players. He will suit Sunderland. But I'm not sure that they're going to get off to a flyer. I do feel it's going to be a bit of a slow start. And I feel Cardiff at the moment are in slightly better nick. Did a lot more of their work early. And he had a goal threat last year, which is something we didn't maybe expect so much from an Errol Balut side. So I'm actually on this occasion going to go for a Cardiff win. It's a bit of a hunch, but it's match week 1. We've got nothing else to base this off. I'm going to go for Cardiff to win pretty comfortably. Sunderland struggled for goals at the end of last year, just won in their last 6. And I'm going to go for them to start with a blank as well. And Cardiff to win at home by 2-0. As we move on to a game that I'm pretty sure was the opening day fixture 2 years ago, if I'm not wrong. It is Hull City versus Bristol City. Two sides that will probably be harbouring ambitions of the playoffs this year. But as we mentioned earlier in the summer, I think a lot of neutral fans were surprised that Hull City let Liam Rosenior go. I go back to a number of other examples across the division and just think, are you trying to run before you can walk? It's very clear that the owner wants a certain style of play. And it's very clear that Tim Walter is going to produce that. His teams are entertaining. I watched them at Hamburg. They ship goals for fun, but they are entertaining to watch. And that's what Hull City want. But are they going to be as solid? Are they going to be as consistent in a championship without that little bit of a defensive base? Yes, they've got Ryan Giles back permanently. Yes, Cody Drame on the right, another former Luton player. They both provide excellent delivery. But obviously they have lost a bit of attacking stardust. Philogene has gone to Aston Villa. That is going to be a huge, huge loss. He was the magic man in that team. They've also lost Jacob Greaves at centre-half, albeit they got a fantastic fee for him. And even Tufan, who was a little bit of a threat from midfield as well. So there is a little bit of work to do for Hull City. For Bristol City, I hate to say it, I feel a bit cautiously optimistic for them. And that's knowing that Bristol City are always one of the most inconsistent teams in the division. Bar the final day last year, they actually finished quite well. Sinclair Armstrong's a good addition to their team and the way they want to play. And Liam Manning is establishing a style of play at the club. But again, it needs stability. And that's something that he's going to have to be afforded. Have they got enough to push up to that playoff race? I'm not quite sure in truth. I think this game will be a quite entertaining one. Tim Walter is going to be goals galore at both ends. They did have a very heavy defeat against a good Fenerbahce side a couple of weeks ago. But do you know what? I've just got a funny feeling about this one. The game 2 years ago I mentioned or alluded to, it was a late stoppage time winner for Hull. I could see it just going the other way here. I mentioned it in a manager special. I don't think Hull will finish as high with Tim Walter in charge, but I think they'll be a great team to watch for the neutral. I'm going to go for Bristol City to nick this one. I was tempted by the Championship's favourite scoreline. I'm going to go 2-1 to the visitors. As we move on to another of the promoted sides who travel to a side who will be very upset they didn't go up last year. It is Leeds United versus Portsmouth. Leeds, the early pre-season favourites who stayed down despite getting 90 points last season. Obviously gutted with that playoff final defeat against Southampton, where in truth, they didn't really turn up. Since we recorded our pre-season predictions video last week, where I did tip them for the title, they then went and lost Somerville. But I'm not sure that that's going to be a disaster for them if they can find the right replacements. I'm more surprised that in addition to Archie Gray, they've let Glenn Kamara go in the middle too, because it does leave them a little lighter in that area. But they've still got a really high quality squad. I actually thought in the playoff semi-finals, Rutter was the best player. They've still got Nonto as well, but I think Rutter's the one to watch this season if they can keep hold of him. There are a few players returning from loan from the Premier League era, and there are a few decent additions in the squad. Keeping Roden permanently was important. Jayden Bogle comes in and adds a little bit of depth on that right side of the fence where Leeds have had their struggles in the last year or two. And Joe Rothwell, always a solid player at this level. For Pompey, it's all gone a little bit wrong in pre-season, hasn't it? They've signed a few decent players, but obviously sad news with Colby Bishop having to have a minor heart operation, which will leave him out for a while. So we do wish him a speedy recovery. But in addition to that, not many top championship signings, more players that Mousinho can mould. And to be fair, he's done that very well since he's been at Pompey. They weren't expected to win the title last year. They continue to defy expectations, but they are still a little bit light in the spine of the team for me. They have got the 6 promotion favourites in their opening 7 games, so I maybe wouldn't judge Pompey too much on the first month and a half. I'm going to go for Leeds to win this one. I know they normally start slowly. Daniel Farke sides normally start slowly. And I don't think it'll be the most coherent performance yet. But I do think Leeds will win it. I think Pompey are lacking a goal threat at the moment. Sorensen may well end up being the star. But I'm going to go for Leeds to win by 1-0. And maybe it be a little bit of a frustrating day for both sides. But Leeds ultimately with the 3 points. Next up, we move on to another side expecting to be in that promotion chase this year. It is Middlesbrough versus Swansea City. For Middlesbrough, very much a season where it's about keeping people fit. Michael Carrick given a new deal after they were suffering with injuries last year. But they've got to add the goal threat to the team. As it looks in the transfer window, they're trying to secure deals at the time of recording for Micah Hamilton and Tommy Conway. Those would both be excellent additions to the club. And Latilaf did look a lot better towards the end of last season, which does give them something there. But overall, Middlesbrough have a playoff level squad in my opinion. The only thing they hadn't done last year is keep most of it fit. That run to the Carabao Cup semi-final maybe proved to be counterintuitive at the end. But Michael Carrick's a good young coach. We saw what they can do the year before, and I think they're potentially 1 or 2 signings from really getting going. For Swansea, it's about having another steady season. They need stability under Williams as they build their style of play. And they did finish the season relatively well last year. Picked up a few good results, started to keep clean sheets, which isn't like Swansea, albeit against lowly opposition. And I just think for this year, it's about progress. They've signed some good young players from abroad, but it's about how they adapt to the league. It probably will take a little while to happen. And obviously they did lose Nathan Wood at the back, who is a key player for them. For Southampton and Russell Martin came calling. So for this game, I think it will be relatively tight. I think both sides will want to keep possession. Swansea will end up having more of it. Borough may be able to hit on the counter. And I think it will be a narrow victory for the hosts. I just feel they're a little more settled at the minute. So I'm going to go for Middlesbrough to win, narrowly by 2-1. Well, the next game, I don't think many will have as the thriller of the week. It is Millwall versus Watford. Neil Harris returned to Millwall in the spring of last year and delivered a sea of 1-0 victories to secure survival very comfortably in the end. Whereas for Watford, a spell of draws under Tom Cleverley earned him the job permanently. It's been an interesting summer for both of them. The headline news at Millwall, of course, is the gamble on Macaulay Langstaff, who has been a prolific goal scorer in the National League and League Two in recent seasons. Is he going to be able to keep that up in a championship? Tanganga joins again permanently, which is a good addition for them in a championship. For Watford, been a strange old summer again. We've seen the usual addition from Udinese, but aside from that, Musa Sissoko returning, a really good professional, a good player. I know he's 34 now, but I've always been a big fan of him. So despite being a Luton fan, Musa Sissoko, I always wish well. A couple of other good younger additions. Larouci will be an interesting one on the left, but I'm not sure that they've done anywhere near enough to be pushing the top 6 yet. So I think for both teams, it could end up being a frustrating mid-table season, and maybe in the lower half of the table as well. In this game, I'm going to stick with Millwall to do what they've been doing for, well, a few months under Neil Harris. I'm going to go for them to nick it by 1-0. I can see both sides setting up not to get beat on the opening day, and in the end, it might just be a set piece or something like that. As we move on to the last of the newly promoted sides, and the only one that's at home on the opening day, it is Oxford United versus Norwich City, who after playoff semi-final defeat last year sacked David Wagner, but they did bring in Thorup, who I think is a good young coach. It's going to be interesting with Norwich this year because While I didn't predict them to finish in the top six, I do think they're one of the sides capable of being in the playoff race. At the moment, they've still managed to keep hold of their key players in attacking areas, albeit there's been a little bit more turnover in defence, and Sarah has obviously moved on for big money. But there are a couple of young players in, maybe not enough to suggest that they're going to kick on. But as we can see, with this many weeks to go in the window, there's still going to be plenty of action yet. For Oxford, it's been a very busy window. After the disappointment of losing Josh Murphy early on to Pompey, a fellow promoted side, they've gone big and they've been very busy. The likes of Peter Kioso we've had at Luton before, Sibley, always a player that's had massive potential, will he unlock it now? And then in the last week or so, that bit of experience too, the likes of Matt Phillips, Will Vauxhall, who's got a great long throw on him as well, might be another weapon. It does give us a side that I think will be tactically pretty good at this level. They were exceptional in all three playoff games. They were set up really well. The diligence done by Des Buckingham really paid off. And I do wonder for this season, I said it in a prediction show, you have to have them in that relegation mix because of the budget, because of the level of squad. But there's part of me that thinks they will be able to do a job this year. And I'm not entirely confident in my relegation prediction. I think they'll be close. I think they'll have a good season. But for Norwich at the moment, they've got a good goal threat in that team. And I think if everyone's fit on the opening day, they'll probably just nick it by 2-1. As we move on to a repeat of a game that I actually remember last year for a handball incident, but it's Queen's Park Rangers versus West Brom. QPR are going to be one of the interesting sides this season. How do they get on with a few of the players that have been mainstays in recent season moving on from the club? And a number of players coming in from abroad who are going to have to settle in a championship. It may take a little bit of time, but I actually think QPR under Marti Cifuentes, they just need a very comfortable year. They got involved in that dogfight last season. The year before, they changed styles and managers 2 or 3 times. It just didn't work. So this time, it needs to be settled. He needs a full season, and they just need to be nowhere near that battle at the bottom. And I don't think there will be. I think they'll have a mid-table season. Of course, the keynotes are that Armstrong and Willock have moved on. But coming in the other way, they have signed a proven goal scorer from Switzerland. Will he be able to replicate that form in England? If he does, it could be a good season for QPR. For West Brom, I know they've looked awful in pre-season. I know they've got the cash flow problems. They've had to let a few players move on. Thomas Asante being one of them, of course. But they have taken a little bit of a gamble on Devante Cole, who scored a lot in League One last year. And I wonder that with 2 or 3 more additions of the experience of Wildsmith and McNair, that they're going to have a squad that is able to compete and do the job again. The one thing I will never do is back against Carlos Corberán. I think he'll get it right. He's done it with Huddersfield and with West Brom. And although they're still paying for the previous owner's era, I do think they're going to get something out of this game. I've got to the 9th game without doing it yet. I couldn't leave it for the whole match week. I'm going for the Championship's favourite scoreline. 1-1 is the outcome I'm predicting. But if anyone's going to nick it, I think it might be QPR. And the final game on Saturday is Stoke City versus Coventry City. We come into the season saying what we always do. Oh, Stoke, they look a little bit better on paper. Oh, they've got a little bit of a chance this year. We're all feeling optimistic. They're signing well. But then it always flatters to deceive, doesn't it? They beat Rotherham handsomely on the opening day of last year. No one knew at the time how poor Rotherham were going to be. And after that, it became a very difficult season. Again, I do think Steven Schumacher's the right man. But he's going to need time, he's going to need a few more additions, and he's going to need patience, something that's so often not afforded in a championship. Ben Gibson, Sam Gallagher, Victor Johansson, all very solid championship additions, just add a little bit of dependability to the squad. Consistency in performance, getting results away from home is going to be key, and Stoke City have added a little bit of that, but they still need to do more. On the flip side, Coventry under Mark Robins, it started a bit weird this summer, didn't it? With the sort of unexplained changes in the backroom team that weren't particularly well explained and were a little bit surprising to many. But the transfer work on the pitch is looking good. After losing Callum O'Hare to Sheffield United, they've added Brandon Thomas Asante, they've added Radoni from Huddersfield, Binks and Dovin, good players as well. It's just a very solid squad. It's Mark Robins doing what he does. And I know a few of the Coventry fans in the comments last week for the pre-season prediction said, well, maybe we can get the top 2, which I do think is a bit of a stretch. I think the playoff chase and the chance of getting in there is really high. Craig's put them in there. I had them right in the mix in 7th. And I just think there's every chance. You're never back against Mark Robins because he's got the one thing that virtually no other championship club can offer. True stability. And that is something that is incredibly undervalued these days. They're always up there. May well have got in last year if it wasn't for that amazing run in the FA Cup. So I'm going to go for them to nick it on the opening day. I don't think it's going to be a thrilling match. I'm going to go for Coventry by 1-0. 2 to go, and we've got to move on to the rest of the weekend for these ones, because on Sunday afternoon, it is Sheffield Wednesday versus Plymouth. There's been a lot of talk about Plymouth Argyle this summer. We've done the manager special with Wayne Rooney. This is an appointment that perhaps on paper isn't that inspiring. One of the things I would say about them is I thought it was going to be a difficult year regardless of who they got in. Having Wayne Rooney or not doesn't really change that. What did concern me is I went to watch them last weekend away at MK Dons, and while MK were missing a goal scorer, having lost their own one in League Two, Plymouth were being carved open at will by a League Two side, and you would have to say that against a good Championship opposition, which Sheffield Wednesday under Danny Roll very much are, I would be concerned that there'll be goals going in at the other end. So maybe not the most inspiring appointment, maybe not the best pre-season, but they did get the win in that game and a clean sheet, so maybe that's a confidence builder. I've noted that since that game, they've added yet another centre-half, and I think they're going to need a couple more because they were getting carved open between the centre-halves and the full-backs at will. They didn't really create much from open play as well. They relied on a goalkeeper dallying in possession to get the win. But I think it's going to be an interesting season. They go to Sheffield Wednesday on the opening day, which at the moment is probably one of the worst places to go. They finished like an absolute train under Danny Roll, who, in my opinion, tying him down next season is probably the best signing in the Championship, player management or anything. I think he's superb. I've said it before, if Rob Edwards left Luton, he's the man I'd want. And they've signed pretty well as well. Max Lowe and Jan Valery add a little bit of dynamism in wide areas from fullback, allows them to be a little bit more aggressive at home. They've added experience in Shalabar, goals in Lowe. Hamer's got experience at the back as well. And then they've added that bit of youth as well. You've got Beadle back in, you've got McNeil up front. It's just a really nicely balanced squad. I think they'll have a very comfortable year, probably pushing the upper end of mid-table, maybe even sneaking higher with the right additions. I just hope, because Chansiri does have a habit of shooting himself in the foot, that he leaves him alone this season. If he does, I think it'll be a great year for Wednesday. And I'm going to go for them to win pretty handsomely on the opening day. I'm going to go by 3-1. And the final game on Monday night, the best till last, you might say. The game I'm going to be at is Luton Town versus Burnley. The battle of the two relegated clubs in, well, very different positions actually, because Luton came down having won the hearts of a lot of Premier League fans, being very aggressive and adapting their style under Rob Edwards. Unfortunately though, it's been a little bit of a quiet summer so far, and due to a couple of key departures in Ross Barkley and particularly Gabe Osho in defence, Luton are a little bit short in that area of the pitch now. For Burnley, it's been a lot of turnover in terms of players, a few loans made permanent, and a few other young additions too. However, on the flip side of that, Burnley have had the longest manager saga of the Championship summer, Scott Parker finally getting appointed in early July. So it's hard to know what to expect from this one. Burnley also have their own issues in certain positions. Trafford is still there at the moment, but we expect none of last year's goalkeepers to be there at the end of the window. Will Lackey come in straight from the off? I don't know. But the games between Luton and Burnley have always been tight. I just feel like everything points towards this being a really close game. Neither squad's probably in its complete nick yet. I would expect both sides to maybe lose 1 or 2 stars as well. So I think, despite the fact that there's part of me that wants to be biased with Kenilworth Road under the lights and all of that, I'm just going to go safe for the Championship's favourite scoreline. I think it will likely be a very close game, and I could easily see it being 2-1 either way. But I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline for the second time to finish off. A 1-1 draw between Luton Town and Burnley, which I think both sides will be relatively happy with. So with that out the way, let's have a quick recap of what I've gone for this weekend. A thriller to start off, and actually the joint highest scoring game, the one we'll be watching here on Friday night, Blackburn v Derby. And I've gone for one team to score 3, that is Sheffield Wednesday at home to Plymouth. Otherwise, I've gone for a lot of tight scorelines. You know there's always 1 or 2 shocks on the opening day. And I've largely gone for most of the favourites to win. Maybe the slight surprises, Cardiff to beat Sunderland comfortably at home and Bristol City to nick one away at Hull. But otherwise, I think it's going to be an interesting opening day. Just 2 Championship's favourite scorelines for me. But how many are you going to go for? Get involved down in the comments as always. Give us your score predictions for all of the matches. And if you beat or match my overall score with 1 point for a correct outcome and 3 points for the perfect score, you will get a shout out in a recap at the start of Match Week 2's video where we look ahead to the weekend action after the opening day. But for now, thank you very much for getting involved as always. Please do put a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you haven't checked them out yet, come and get involved in our pre-season prediction videos for all the leagues. Let us know who you think will be promoted in the playoffs and relegated from them. Come and join me on Friday night for the live stream and get involved in the description with a link to Fantasy EFL, a prize for the winner this season. Thank you very much for watching though. We're grateful and happy to have the EFL back, and I'm grateful that my team's back in a league without VAR. I'll see you next time to reflect on the opening weekend and look ahead to match week 2.